Fire is my favorite element in all of HSR. It contains 6 of my top 20 favorite characters, and contains 3 of my favorite DPS characters to use, Topaz, Himeko, and Firefly. After a long period of irrelevance in 3.x, it's really nice to see some of these characters back on top, dominating the meta. That, however, doesn't change the fact that quite a few Fire characters still aren't amazing, or they have some pretty glaring issues in their kits that make them not as good as other options. Today, I want to sit down and fix that. I will be going over a bunch of the weaker Fire characters in the HSR roster, and coming up with what I think their buff should be if they were to get Nova Flared sometime soon. As per usual with these types of videos, I'm not a master in balancing or game design. I'm just a creator who loves this game and wants to see more characters be great. I really hope you guys enjoy this, and if you do, hopefully we can even make a series out of it. Now with that said, let's get into it. Alright, so quick disclaimer. There are some Fire characters in HSR who do not need buffs or have already received them. The title just sounds way better when you say every Fire character. We will be skipping over Firefly, Dahlia, Morden X Blade, and Sparksy. Also, yeah, we'll talk about you later. Now, let's begin with my favorite base game 5-star, Himeko. We'll use Himeko as a bit of an example to explain the process I'll be going through with all the other characters. Himeko is an erudition character, a path that specializes in AoE scenarios primarily. There are of course exceptions like an Exa, but those exceptions are few and far between. Next, let's look at what Himeko does well. Himeko was released when the game launched, which means she was intended to be a crit damage DPS character. She did, however, have a very key element of her kit relating to break. For every break she got, it would give her a charge. When she has 3 charges, she will unleash her follow-up attack, which does damage to all enemies on the field. This is the bread and butter of Himeko, as her ult and skill are both rather insignificant. Pretty wild considering her ult is her attack with the highest multiplier, and it's only 120 energy, so relatively easy to get for a DPS character. Back to her strengths, Himeko in the current day has primarily found life as a main break DPS for pure fiction. In the clips on screen, you can see Himeko's follow-up going off multiple times in a row, to the point it can entirely solo waves. This is the primary strength of Himeko, and the reason she can be relevant in pure fiction. If Himeko is strong enough to eliminate an enemy and replace it with a new one, that means on her next follow-up, there will be a new toughness bar for her to break. This will essentially replace the charges you just used, guaranteeing you another follow-up right after your current one. There is basically no other character in the game that can do this like Himeko can, and it's a part of her identity that her players absolutely love. With this unique and extremely fun formula, Himeko found permanent life as a break character, almost entirely abandoning her former crit damage lifestyle. With Himeko's strengths analyzed, we can now move on to what direction I want her buffs to take her, and after, we can finally talk about the buffs I would give. With Himeko, it's clear she is no longer meant to be a crit character. It could work with some adjustments, but what players love about her is the follow-up prowess that she has. The mechanic being linked to break means there's no choice on what type of buff she should receive. She needs to be transformed fully into a break character going forward. And while she primarily succeeds in pure fiction, having the ability to do well elsewhere is a very high priority. She will always do better in AoE fights, but having some sort of adjustment to single target, or hell, even specifically blast scenarios, would do a lot to improve her performance in other game modes. I think a very simple and honestly underutilized way to do this is by applying enemy number conditions on parts of her kit. Looking at other characters who are primarily AoE, Saber has it in base kit, Herta has it as part of her E6, Evanescence has it in her major traces, and Jayde has it as part of her E1. All of these characters get some sort of increased benefit if they are fighting a lower number of enemies, since they are primarily AoE based. This is a great mechanic, and I think incorporating it is a fantastic choice to keep characters a bit more relevant in content that they aren't perfectly suited for. In terms of updating her moveset overall, I think drawing a lot of inspiration from Jayde and Rappa would be a decent start. While the characters are objectively very different, with Jayde having way more sub-DPS elements, and Rappa being the actual erudition break DPS, they probably have the closest similarities to Himeko within this path. Ideally, with these characters and some others in mind, I can find a decent middle ground for where Himeko's buffs will land her. So now, this takes us to the fun part that gets me cancelled on Twitter. How would I buff Himeko? I'm gonna tell you all right now, looking back on this script, Jesus Christ, I may have overdone it. These changes won't be like Welt level since he had so much uniqueness added to his kit, but I will try and improve or change everything wrong with her kit. The very first change is one players have been craving for over a year, changing Himiko's cap on her follow-up attacks. Right now, the cap lies at 3 and you cannot exceed it at all. The cap being 3 is pretty nice, since that means even without Fugue, you would only need 3 enemies to activate the follow-up, so that's nice. With Fugue, however, this becomes significantly easier, and the ideal team for these characters should be a factor. I've struggled for months trying to decide what exact change I would give this mechanic, since it can be so volatile. I even tried to do calculations for this, but in the end, it doesn't matter quite as much as you think. Himiko's actual power level isn't as much the issue here, it's her usability in other scenarios, and how easily she's hampered without multiple targets to break. As a result of this, I think allowing her to overcap by even 1 target is enough to make her viable. However, I want broken, so she's getting her overcap raised to 5. From here, the rest of her kit is going to focus a lot on changes and maintaining them. Let's start with raising Himiko's damage across the board. Basic attack, that's going to remain the same, no shocker there. I won't even be mentioning basics unless they're changed, by the way. Now looking at the actual multiplier numbers, her skill will go from 220% and 80% fire damage to adjacent targets, to 300% attack and 150% fire damage to adjacent targets. This puts her right in line with Evanescence as another character who doesn't rely much on skill, but still likes using it. We will also be adding another effect to the skill. When hitting a weakness broken enemy with skill, you will gain 1 point of charge. This will be limited to 1 charge point per use of skill. I don't think this will truly be that effective, but I do think it will give her faster access to her follow-up in fights where she cannot keep breaking constantly. Next up is her ultimate. Another boring change, the percent on this will be changed from 230 to 320. As a low energy cost ult, I really don't want it to be too strong. The additional effect on this is regenerating energy for every enemy defeated, and quite frankly, I find that to be pretty nonsensical. The devs don't like taking stuff away from the kits, however, so I think a simple alternative would be giving a 30% break effect boost for 3 turns when using ultimate. Himiko is likely to never lose this buff, and while 30% break effect is nice, it shouldn't be that groundbreaking. This was inspired by Rappa, who also gained more toughness reduction, but that would probably be very dangerous for the meta if I included that as well. Moving on to talent, besides the aforementioned overcap changes, I'll be changing the damage scaling on follow-up from 140% attack to 40% fire break damage. I personally still think this is too high, especially considering the other changes I have in mind, but please remember, I am not perfect. I can only do so much here. The last thing to touch on are Himiko's major traces. They are, they're horrible, to say the least.
Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
We gotta fix these up ASAP. First up, to incentivize Himiko being attack scaling, we'll be changing her first trace to reflect what Boothill, Rappa, and Firefly have. Once Himiko reaches 2800 attack, for every 100 points above 100, gain 5 break effect up to a maximum increase of 30%. I know some people are probably disappointed with the constant break effect boost, but I'm really trying my best to follow normal HSR design philosophy here. Rarely do characters get Def Down or Res Pen in base kit, so I'm trying to reflect that while still making this good at least. The second trace will basically be a mirror of what Rappa's Sea Echo trace is. When Himiko's follow-up hits a weakness broken target, convert the toughness reduction from this instance to 1 instance of 30% super break damage. The last trace I have in mind is a 2-in-1 trace, since that's a little more common nowadays. The first part will be moving Himiko's E4 to base kit, where if you weakness break with skill, you will receive an extra point of charge. The next part of this trace will be if Himiko is facing 2 or less enemies, increase the break damage dealt by Himiko by 20%. Himiko's Eidolons also need to be massively improved, but that's even more planning on top of what I've already done, so I'll be leaving her Eidolons and technique alone for this video. In this buff scenario, Himiko is easily the best AoE break character in the game. Not only does she have proper scalings and an overcap in place to help her keep her charges easier, but now she has a more viable way to deal damage with single target fights, thanks to her increased usability on skill and her increased damage in those fights on her new trace. Are these changes overkill? Yeah, probably. Do I particularly care? No. I think this would be a super unique and fun take on Himiko to make her far more powerful. While these changes would be a lot for right now, genuinely by version 5.x, I think this would be relatively tame. With Himiko's new form being a thing as well, I imagine that's the earliest we would be seeing buffs for our standard banner queen. Although honestly, as long as they buff her at some point, I'll be happy. Next character on my list for today is another subject of constant scrutiny, Jiaoqiu. Jiaoqiu is a Nihility debuffer who last saw consistent use before the release of Cypher. With Nihility focusing a lot on defense reduction and increasing damage taken primarily, We want to keep that in mind for Jiaoqiu. While yes, he is considerably more mediocre nowadays, he still has some pretty solid strengths. First off, Jiaoqiu increases enemy damage taken by 35% with his signature debuff, Ashen Roast. His stacks always apply on new enemies whenever they enter the field, and it will match the highest stacks on the field currently. He also has partial DOT ability, which was a nice boost for him, as he already needed incredibly high effect hit rate to get the max benefit from his buffs. That, however, is about where the good ends. His damage buff is very low compared to current characters, he has no true consistent damage output, and he doesn't have anything else in his kit that makes him a definitively better option than others. Cypher has a massive amp and also has an amazing ult that can be used to obliterate enemies in unique ways. She also has a follow-up attack, allowing her to be an asset to follow up teams as well as teams needing a consistent debuffer. Welt has the unique ability to be the best sustainless choice in the game, slowing enemies endlessly while still increasing damage dealt by massive amounts with his weightless debuff. Imaginary is really the only element this can be done with though, besides maybe freeze, so any possibility of stalling enemies is ruled out immediately. Lastly is the new Blade, and yeah, that man and Ashvale are essentially Acheron if she also had massive debuffs in her kit. Blade has amazing damage dealing potential, amazing debuffs, and has the ability to be flexible with multiple teams. Looking back to Jiaoqiu, he just doesn't hold a candle to them. It's a pretty bad life for Jiaoqiu, which is why we need to look into how to fix it. Now I know many of you are expecting something from me with these buffs, and I know what you're all waiting for. The restoration of Jiaoqiu's healing that he had in his original beta cycle. I'm here to tell you one thing, dear viewers. He needs way more than that. It would have been nice to have on top of other buffs, but it's a gimmick at best without more substance. There needs to be a focus on improving his core performance and his usability in other places. The way I see it, the buffs can go two ways. Make Jiaoqiu a specifically DOT-oriented support character, which I'm not sure about after the general buffs to Black Swan, or we can make Jiaoqiu a hybrid unit similar to Welt and Mordenak's Blade, balancing high value damage increases and Death Shred with solid crit damage overall. The big issue with both of these options is that better characters already occupy both, so finding something to differentiate is going to be incredibly difficult. Ultimately, I don't think either of these is going to be the ideal path for him. We're going to need to find something that manages to combine every element of what Jiaoqiu is as a character into something just significantly stronger than where he is at currently. And yes, that is as difficult as it sounds. With that in mind, we at least have the groundwork of what he needs, so let's start changing this kit. I'd like to quickly thank Azure and my Discord for helping come up with this redesign. I changed a few things, but overall, they did an amazing job. The Nova Flare in mind here is pretty interesting, and does a good job of differentiating from what Blade and Welt do. Jiaoqiu will go from just a normal debuffer that helps Acheron, to a debuffer that can help DOT, heal a little, and provides higher value when debuffing with a new enhanced debuff state. Starting with Ashen Roast, the total count Jiaoqiu can apply will be increased to 10. The initial multiplier will now be 17.5 on the first stack, and each stack will increase the amount by 2.5. These stacks will also now lower enemy attack by a small amount, which should help keep your team alive a bit better. Once you reach 7 stacks of Ashen Roast though, Jiaoqiu will inflict the Overseasoned state on enemies. This state makes it so that debuffs will no longer be removed by the target. They will have 50% lower effect res so that you can easily apply your debuffs, and attacking them will now restore health similar to Gallagher's Besotted state. The benefits of Overseasoned don't end here, as we can now move on to his ultimate. The changes here, once again, pretty simple. The damage increase of his ult has been buffed from 15% to 20%, and now in the Overseasoned state, ultimate damage dealt will now be increased by 35%. Lastly, you'll also heal party members with Jiaoqiu, increasing the heal value for every stack of Ashen Roast on an enemy. Now I know what you're thinking. This is cool, but if he doesn't get his ult consistently, then how does this truly add value for him? Well, there's a change for that too. Every time an enemy exceeds 7 Ashen Roast stacks, Jiaoqiu will regenerate 10 energy. Ashen Roast is now easier to apply than ever as well, with Jiaoqiu applying roast stacks when allies do ultimate damage, when the enemy is afflicted with 5 debuffs or more, and when any debuff is received. With this, Jiaoqiu should be able to regen his ult in a timely manner to keep healing the team, while also dispersing debuffs constantly. There's also been slight changes to his major traces, with his attack scaling trace now also giving outgoing healing boost. And his Pyre Cleanse trace, now in addition to granting him energy, is way more helpful for ultimate damage dealers. Essentially, when an ally attacks using ultimate, for every Ashen Roast stack on the field up to 10, they will regenerate a small amount of energy. I think the listed percent was probably a bit much overall. Solid idea that I do think could hold some weight in making him a viable option for other characters. Now, is this rework perfect? No. I'm still not sure it's nearly enough for him to carve out a consistent role in the game currently. Is it better than where he was currently, with a more unique identity though? Absolutely. Jiaoqiu is one of the hardest characters in this game to work with and really improve. He has been replaced hundreds of times, and with the choice to either make him DOT oriented or keep his role as a natural debuffer, I think this was about the best we could do for him. The next character up today is going to be far easier to talk about, I think. My favorite character in the game, Fugue. Now, Fugue is truthfully a character who doesn't need much. If you look at her outside Firefly teams, she is a necessary support and is extremely good for Break as a whole. While Firefly doesn't benefit quite as much, she still does offer a lot with the double break bars, her powerful E1 and E2, and additional break effect boost, which is always appreciated. She lies much in the same position that Sparkle did in my opinion. A solid character with a defined home and a decent kit. Now, that doesn't mean she's without flaws. Fugue's energy regen is pretty miserable, but that doesn't matter much when her ult is basically useless. Now, assuming you don't do sustainless or have no eidolons, then yeah, maybe this ult can help you weaken enemies enough to break them with your main DPS. The ability to hit all enemies is also pretty nice, but realistically, it's weak and fairly mediocre. Her basic attack similarly has very little use, as a 18% defense shred in break teams is really not that good when so many characters get so much defense shred already. She genuinely does have a few issues that, much like Sparkle, would make her insanely better if changed. And that is enough to put her on the list for today. With some of these issues in mind now, let's go through her kit and see what we can do to fix it. First thing I want to talk about is her skill. As mainly a quality of life change, I think reworking it to the way Dahlia or DHPT's talent works would be ideal. Have Foxy and Prayer apply to the ally who initiates battle. It's a small change, but I don't think it harms anyone and would probably be an ideal way to save SP for later. Plus, if you want to get her more energy, you can simply reapply the buff even if it was auto-applied at the start of battle. I really don't see this being a big issue at all. Now, in terms of the effect, there are a few things I want to change. I do genuinely believe we've reached a point where we could put E1 as part of base kit and have it be reasonable, but let's avoid that for now and focus on the buffing aspect. Fugue currently gives a 30% break effect boost to the target of her skill. An interesting idea I saw from one of my viewers rolling downhill was to make Fugue give 40% plus a percentage of her own break effect, much like the typical crit damage share abilities. Additional break effect is something pretty saturated in break teams, but considering this just makes building the characters even easier, I think it's perfectly acceptable to add it in. Next is the debuff she gains from her enhanced basic attack. Instead of just 18% Death Shred, I want to change this to 10% all-type Res Pen for the ally with Foxy and Prayer, in addition to the Death Shred. Useful for every break character, and with Defense Shred likely being maxed for your DPS already, this is another damage boost that is less common and will provide more value in turn. We also have a precedent for it with Ceridra also giving all-type Res Pen, so I don't think this is outlandish at all. Now quickly moving to the enhanced basic attack, I would change it so that Fugue regenerates 30 energy on basic, so you don't always have to skill for more energy. You can just attack and get the exact same value. Next up, Fugue's ult. This ability is really hard to make good, honestly. It serves as just a weak screen nuke, but what makes this different compared to Dahlia is that Fugue doesn't apply any debuffs on it. Let's change that. Taking a page from Lingsha's book, I want to make it so that when Fugue hits enemies with her ult, they take increased super break damage for 3 turns. Probably about a 25% increase would be pretty nice. After that, her base kit is looking pretty good, so now, her major traces need to be adjusted as well. The main two I'm looking at are her Renaissance and Primordia traces. Yes, I only use the end words, I don't know how to say the first words. I don't really care about the action delay too much, but I would like to add that Fugue will regenerate 5 energy at the start of all her turns. Yes, I know this is probably cataclysmic if you have E2, I am not thinking about that right now. Let her have 1 turn ult with tutorial for all I care. That's just a reason for min-maxers to use her again. As for the second major trace, I instead want to make it so that at 200% break effect, grant the ally with Foxy and Prayer a 15% break damage boost. The rest of the teammates do not need more break effect quite frankly, and this benefits Boothill, Rappa, and Firefly pretty well. With that trace change, we're done with Fugue. Once again, this is a character who doesn't need much, but I think would really benefit from it. This would also help cement not only her place in Super Break, but Super Break as a whole for longer, meaning HSR could focus on other team types and characters without having to make a new Super Break character or letting the archetype die off. Seriously, please don't let it die off again. Alright, so right now the script is already at 6 pages and we have 2 characters left. Problem is, these are 2 of the most confusing characters in the game when it comes to potential Nova Flares. I'm of course talking about Topaz and Lingsha. Topaz is the most replaced character in HSR history, and she really has no place anywhere, with every option being undeniably better than her and easy to acquire. Then we have Lingsha, a character who doesn't excel with her archetype at all. She has instead found more success as a DPS character instead of a sustain. Genuinely, with all of these other characters, there was some sort of reasonable path of improvement, even for Jiaoqiu, since he could have a new identity rooted in his DOT ability if we wanted. These 2? I've got no clue. Let's pull off the band-aid and start with my personal favorite of the 2, Topaz. Yeah, I'm not going to do a long-winded intro for this one. Topaz sucks. Her multipliers are low, her debuffs aren't as valuable, her ult charge is slow, and Numby isn't super strong. She is also outclassed in every way by at least 1 character, whether it be attack frequency with Moze, damage with Ash Veil, utility with Tribby, or anything else that you can think of. This character is rough, and I don't think there is a valid way to make her into a proper sub-DPS that is capable of assisting a team right now. So instead, we're gonna make my dream come true, and this Topaz Nova Flare will make her a main DPS. Yes, this is unrealistic, and I do not care. Let's get started. So first and foremost, all of Topaz's multipliers need to be increased. We will be keeping Proof of Debt too, since it's a big staple of her toolkit. Starting with skill, bumping this up to 400% seems pretty fair. It will also retain being considered a follow-up attack, so we can more easily proc Numby attacks. Moving on to the big one for Topaz, her ultimate. Windfall Bonanza is where most of the damage for this character comes from, but it's very limited not only in duration, but actual scaling. While I don't want to jump too far, changing the scaling to a 300% damage multiplier and an additional 100% crit damage for Numby during this state would give a pretty massive offensive boost. These numbers may seem a little high, but considering Topaz's single target, she needs a lot of extra juice to actually remain competitive. This still isn't enough though realistically. I think increasing the amount of attacks Numby can produce during Windfall Bonanza would help, but realistically, what if instead it was linked to Topaz's turns? Everything would remain the same, with Numby advancing when allies attack, but now, Numby would go far more consistently in a 2-turn period with attack-heavy teammates. This has the potential to go crazy and deal a lot of damage with the current characters in the game, and I think it would be incredibly beneficial for Topaz. Depending on how frequent these attacks would be, might mean the multiplier buff needs to be reduced down to 200, but as a whole, this change would be extremely powerful, and give her the juice she needs to be a main DPS. Allowing Numby to go more than twice during the enhanced state also helps Topaz's energy quite a bit, with her regenerating more energy just with Numby outputting more attacks. Similarly, switching her basic attack to regen 30 energy like her skill would also help her maintain her energy generation even if SP becomes an issue. That one though is probably greedy, we don't actually need to do that one I imagine. The last things I want to touch on are going to be her major traces. Her first trace, Overdraft, is unbelievably useless, so that will be incorporated into her basic attack normally and switch to something more beneficial. I think something fitting would be a trace similar to Tribby's one, where she gets increased damage for every follow-up. Whenever Numby attacks, increase damage taken by follow-up attacks by 20%, and it can stack up to 4 times. You could make this number higher as well, but have it reset when Windfall Bonanza finishes. Next up is Financial Turmoil. This would be a simple change to match Sela's trace, giving Numby a 15% fire res pen boost when in Windfall Bonanza state. 25% like Sela seemed a little too high, considering how often Numby would ideally attack in this state, so cutting it to 15 should help balance it a little. Last trace is Stonks Market, and yeah, this can actually stay exactly the same. With the changes I've outlined today, there should be no issue here. That wraps up what I had in mind for Topaz, and admittedly, I don't think I did enough. I think having a way to boost team damage as well would be good, and while her multipliers are higher, using her may be challenging as you would have to time hits and ult meticulously to get the full value out of the new Windfall Bonanza. This is the main Nova Flare I wanted to talk about today, and I really tried to put some effort into it, but I think I still fell a little flat. Again, not a skilled game designer in any way, so please be nice to me. I'm doing my best out here, man. And now, dear viewers, we arrive at the final character of the day, Lingsha. And boy oh boy, I hate to say it, I've got nothing. I am not exaggerating when I say I have spent hours and days and weeks looking through Nova Flare options for Lingsha. I've read ones viewers have submitted, I've scoured Reddit and YouTube for ideas, I spent so long on Predwin comparing kits trying to come up with ideas, I did as much as I could, but this character is just so damn weird. I don't want to overreact, but just hear me out. You could buff her healing and give her more supportive capabilities, but that still wouldn't make her better than just HMC or Ron Mei more than likely. You could instead transition her to a DPS straight up, but it goes against her path identity, and she would likely be behind Himiko and Rappa still. Genuinely, is there any winning with this character? She isn't bad. She is not a bad character by any means, but she simply has no ideal outcome or landing place in my opinion. What can I do with that? This part is just completely unscripted, but I got so sick of trying to come up with Lingsha ideas, this video got delayed by over a month. I gave up writing because I was having such a miserable time trying to think of something to do with her specifically. Like, again, don't mean to overreact, but yeah, this just sucked. I don't feel like there's anything I could come up with that would keep actual Lingsha players happy while also making her enough of an actual boost in the context of the ideal team for her. So now, dear viewers, with many of you likely upset, I would like to reach out to you. If you have any ideas for a proper Lingsha Nova Flare that could actually make her more usable in the current age of HSR, I would love to see it. Go on my Discord and put it in the custom kit channel, leave a comment, just please give me some ideas here. If we finally have a good enough plan for what to do with Lingsha, I will make a full Lingsha Nova Flare video dedicated entirely to her. I hope that day comes, and I apologize again for failing what I tried to accomplish. That ends our video for today. Thank you again to the wonderful viewers who volunteered their time and ability to come up with such interesting and unique ideas. Tell me down below what your favorite Nova Flare was, and if you think any of these would actually be beneficial enough to change the meta in any way, shape, or form. Thank you all so much for watching. I've got plenty more good videos coming out soon, so I will see you guys then. Bye-bye!